Welcome everybody to the Amberdata Podcast, where we look at everything at the intersections of finance, technology, and blockchain. Today, I'm super excited to have Reid Cuming, the COO and co-founder of Superstate, an asset management firm that's focused on bringing on real-world assets into the blockchain. Reid, really excited to have you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So before we jump into all things Superstate, which I'm really excited to get into, you have a really interesting background, kind of covering everything from the fintech Web 2 side of the world to kind of going full-blown DeFi. And so to kind of meet at the intersection of what you're doing right now, you're basically the perfect person to build what you're building. Would you kind of walk us through your journey into this space, into kind of the crypto world, and then to where you are now building Superstate?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely caveat this by the team that we have at Superstate and at Compound are exceptional, and I'm certainly not the linchpin, but very much do what I can when we're building. Yeah, my career started in consulting, as many young analysts kind of start out, and that was interesting and exciting. I always liked variety, but you really didn't get a chance to really own the outcome. So I quickly got a little bit tired of that and moved into to actually startups. Nothing to do with payments, nothing to do with crypto, nothing to do with finance, just fun ideas and small teams. Those kind of pursued the life cycle of what most startups kind of endure. So looked around, and I'd always admired certain fintech companies like Square, as was known at that point, and just jumped in. It was a gnarly problem to go solve: how to make payments easy, how to do it at scale, and how to ultimately expand into different markets. One of the attributes of kind of the fintech space that I think is maybe not always kind of apparent is, in many cases, they are really great toppers on top of legacy traditional finance infrastructure. They're really great onboarding and user acquisition and volume acquisition channels for those legacy companies. For that reason, they've really just provided a much better experience. But in some cases, the rigidity or the friction that is born derived from those legacy systems isn't always fully abstracted. It can create some unfortunate design or system patterns that really just kind of degrade the experience and make it frustrating for the end user. And as I kind of ran into that problem again and again and again, we pulled some heroics to try to smooth those things out. But it became increasingly apparent that if you really wanted to solve some of these gnarly problems, you needed to drill further to the core. And I think blockchains were really kind of that sort of answer in my mind, the solution of just replace what exists with something superior,
Yeah.
and then build on top of that. And so that's why I got really excited about blockchain, and I had known the the Compound founders earlier, and got increasingly enamored with what they were building. It obviously took off and was extraordinarily successful, and proved the value of DeFi on decentralized systems like Ethereum. And so I had an opportunity to join and really kind of leverage my experience from fintech of how do we effectively, for lack of a better term, wrap the yield or the infrastructure here at Compound in ways that is accessible to a particular market, like institutional corporate treasuries who would like that yield. And this is during ZIRP, right? This is where there was zero interest rate environment. If they were keeping their money at Chase or Wells Fargo, they're earning nothing. So the yield being printed in DeFi was really extraordinary and enticing.
Yeah.
And so that was a very successful product during that period. But of course, we saw the market change, interest rates flip, TradFi interest rates becoming better than DeFi for some time. And that's really where we began to experiment with new ideas as we kind of saw the world changing, recognizing that Compound Treasury, that product we built, was, while great, maybe not going to be as compelling for some unknown amount of time. And so we needed to maybe rethink what we were building. And the idea of bringing tokenized, real world, or traditional financial yield on chain but then gifting it superpowers of crypto became just increasingly exciting, especially as the recognition of a lot of the stablecoin issuers being that they were just holding cash equivalents on the
Right.
back end and printing a pretty sizable yield, but keeping it for themselves is like,
Mhm.
that's a great business.
Yeah.
But there's probably a better product or another product, a complementary product, if you will,
Mhm.
for that holder, and that's where
That
Superstate kind of emerged.
that's amazing. So from the compound side, you mentioned so there's compound protocol and compound treasury. You mind just kind of stating those two for the
Yeah,
listeners? Because I think
absolutely.
kind of go to one side of it to understand. For me, I generally go compound protocol first, but just so everybody can kind of understand the difference between what you were doing on the treasury side versus compound the protocol.
Yes. Compound the protocol is the DeFi protocol. That is the borrowing lending protocol that is it kind of was one of the jump starts to DeFi summer back in
Yeah.
2020. Really fantastic. Now is on I think V3. Really great piece of technology that just continues to persist and show great value. Compound Treasury was uh, 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 built or developed after the protocol had launched. I think this is even after V2. Uh, and Compound Treasury was really just meant to be kind of a secondary business for the labs group, where it would create a financial structure that was accessible, that really just wrapped the yield being generated by the protocol on USDC and made that yield compliantly approachable for corporate treasuries, various institutions who had a lot of US dollars sitting on, in a bank account, wasn't earning yield. They didn't have the ability to interact with the protocol directly for a variety of reasons. Compliance concerns, risk concerns, or just the wherewithal. Like, not crypto native, don't know what this is. I have dollars I would like to give you, and I would like to then have those dollars earn 4%.
Yeah.
And so we created a vehicle that was a very simple product that allowed those institutions and corporations to effectively invest or to purchase a debt security that would then go out on the back end and invest these assets, mostly in the compound protocol, where
Mhm.
they'd earn the variable interest rate on a daily basis by depositing USDC.
Interesting. So if you kind of transition into what you guys are doing now on the Superstate side, outside of taking just those, I mean, I'd imagine you've learned so many lessons from the compound treasury side that moving this into maybe it's just not dollars anymore, but different assets being brought on chain. What were some of the lessons that you kind of got ahead of time on the treasury side that you've been able to apply at Superstate kind of out of the gates?
Yeah, great question. I think I kind of view this purely from like the perspective of the client or the customer. And
Mhm.
one of those things is, being very forthright, not overselling what you have, being transparent about what it is, what it really does. I think during that last cycle and then this current one that we're in, we definitely see a lot of hype. We see a
Mhm.
lot of kind of shaving off of the edges to appear like a nice smooth surface, when in reality it's like, no, there's some hair on it. So I think that's the first thing, being very transparent, so that you are a trustworthy counterparty for the client. And then secondly is the experience, making the onboarding experience very easy, very straightforward. Because we're dealing with institutions right now, and for the most part, they're used to kind of a pretty, not a difficult uphill battle, but just kind of a slog.
Yeah.
So how do we make that better for them? It's not going to be as seamless as like a retail fintech product, but we can definitely improve upon that quite a bit. And then lastly is really just also listening to the clients. What do they really want?
Mhm.
Want it to be on chain. They want to be able to hold the asset on chain next to the other assets. They don't want to have to go in and out between TradFi
Mhm.
and the blockchain ecosystem, introducing a lot of delays or headaches or just uncertainty on where their money is. So really building the product in a way that accommodated the demands and expectations of the market that we're going after. The market here is very much more at Superstate is much more crypto native than
Mhm.
Compound Treasury, which was really both of them are effectively providing bridges to some degree. Compound Treasury was bridging TradFi institutions to give them yield on chain. While Superstate is really kind of going a little bit a layer deeper, really bridging that gap by actually creating the asset
Yeah.
and putting it on chain.
Interesting. So one of the things that you mentioned, and I'm just curious, as the market's matured, and you see kind of this category of assets coming online, you mentioned the onboarding process becoming easier, or focusing on removing as much friction in that onboarding process as possible. Now, I know in the early days of kind of the crypto world, onboarding anybody was pretty impossible. Explaining how to do all these things and manage keys appropriately and make sure you're interacting in a safe and compliant manner is pretty challenging. Why is the market right now for this category of assets to come on? Because it's always been an area, I think since the beginning of Ethereum, people have always wanted to tokenize pretty much anything that exists. But now we're starting to see non-digital native assets coming on chain. So why is the market right now? Is it a comfort level? Is it the onboarding process is just much smoother? Is it a combination of the pieces? Is the infrastructure better now? Where are you kind of seeing all those play out?
I think it's a combination of those, but I think the big thing is you're absolutely right. There's been kind of fits and starts of non-digital native assets being put on chain, and in many cases, they've just not been that exciting or compelling. For one reason being that the yield or gains you could get from on-chain or digitally native assets was just bigger, and so it's like why do this? Secondly, a lot of the original forays were kind of esoteric or not more exotic.
Mhm.
Collectible watches and art, or it was kind of single attempts. It was a parking garage in Alaska, or some sort of apartment complex in South Carolina. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, there's a buyer for that and the seller, but there's not a lot of them. The
Yeah,
market is limited, the liquidity is limited, so there wasn't really first there wasn't a lot of demand, and the actual liquidity for those markets was just not very high. That changed a lot last year with the Fed increasing rates, so that all of a sudden the safest asset kind of in the world, US government debt, now had a pretty sizable yield, and it started to make a lot of sense for institutions, corporations that held stablecoins, traders, hedge funds, even we're now seeing this from like DAO treasuries, foundation treasuries that hold a lot of either native tokens or stable coins, and they think like, I should diversify, or I should literally get something that's earning some yield, because this is now burning a hole in my pocket if
right.
my strategy is kind of not playing out right now. So I think that's the big change, just the fact that the rates are high enough to be exciting, and also a recognition that during this cycle, there should be some attempt to diversify or hedge, and not just have idling cash. Like we still have like 140 or $50 billion in stable coins.
Yeah.
All of those should be there should be some consideration for how do we make those earn instead of just idling.
Right, right. And so it's interesting to see. So your first product in market on the Superstate side is USTB. And I
Yes.
currently have like roughly 90 million in assets under management. So as you're starting to see the interest and adoption and kind of the um like the use case for earning this yield rather than having these dollars sitting stable doing nothing, where do you see like other categories of assets? Like where are you kind of prioritizing what's next in terms of assets, or is it just continue to grow, the kind of the short-term treasury side of the world, or is it expand further into something into
Yeah.
other areas?
It's a little bit of both. We are. I don't think we're done with USTB. Like I think there's a lot more we can do to make it increasingly more composable and usable on chain, to make it increasingly more stable. I think we're seeing others in the space do a lot of interesting things with 24/7 liquidity for redemptions, integrations with. We're pursuing these things as well. Integrations with intermediaries to make it usable for different trades or different use cases. I think ultimately the desire is for these sort of non-digitally native assets to be just as composable in DeFi as USDC. Where
Yeah.
you can use it as collateral. You can use it in pair trades. You can use it for settlements at OTC desks. Kind of want to make USTB just as usable, of course, within the confines of maintaining compliance. And then I think going further than that is right now USTB is a private fund. It's
Mhm.
available to qualified purchasers. Um, and we do have another product that is going through the SEC review. I think the real desire is to how do we get to a registered tokenized fund or asset that is available to everyone. Anyone can touch it. It's pretty accessible to a very large market, lowering the barrier to entry dramatically.
Yeah.
Now, after that, you're absolutely right. Like, I think we're absolutely going to be looking at what is the market telling us, what our clients want, what would be a great complementary product that is potentially more attuned to, the market that we're seeing today, which is certainly more risk on than it was a year ago.
Yeah.
Um, and we have not made determinations on what that is, but certainly an area we'll be pushing into.
So one of the things that you mentioned that, and I think this is interesting, and I'm curious how you guys are thinking about the composability of this, considering that you're operating in a more regulatory stringent area as opposed to just some native DeFi token that kind of flows freely through the chain. So one of the things I mean, on the data side, I love about this space is the transparency. So like we can see this morning that USTB issued another million tokens this morning. So like from that standpoint, it's really cool. And then from the other side is we can actually see the contract. Like we can see what you have and the protocol, or not the protocol, but what Superstate has said is allowed within the confines of these tokens. And so from the composability standpoint and from a client perspective, you kind of mitigate a lot of the concerns of operating in crypto. You know who your counterparties are, you know who you can and cannot transfer these assets between. But and so from a client perspective, I understand that removes a lot of the hesitation that crypto generally kind of has. On the other side of it, like where the composability plays in, using these assets as collateral, as a pair in a pool, as an LP, how do you see kind of the restrictions that are in place right now for, knowing who's either your counterparty, who's a liquidity provider in a pool? Like, how do you see that moving into the DeFi space? Um, Considering that you maintain like the regulatory um, and remain compliant, but how do you see that moving forward? Because I agree, that's such an awesome area to see explore these assets being put to more use.
Yes, it's a hard question, and I don't think there's like a perfect solution to this yet. We've kind of seen attempts at this at different levels, right?
Mhm.
You see certain kind of permissioned chains, Providence or Canton. We've seen attempts at this as well with things like Aave,
Mhm.
where to kind of create a permissioned pool where everyone is kind of all at the same level of compliance and verifying or vetting. Um, I think for us for this asset, we're going to be a little constrained, and absolutely right. It's not going to be as free floating as a stable coin like USDT, uh, but it will be increasingly, I think, usable to the market that can interact with it.
Yeah.
And for us, we need to ensure that that ecosystem develops and grows, that it doesn't kind of just you know, not happen or that we just kind of expect it to happen. We do need to work with various venues, various counterparties, and various technologists to build the right set of technology that does, ensure that the compliance standards or just the limitations are kind of in place if they where they need to be. But once those are in place, it is really usable. I think a great example is like using the asset as a collateral.
Mhm.
I think that's going to be really really doable within a centralized unitary context as well as a DeFi context. But the technology needs to exist for that to happen, as well as there does need to be a market for it, a desire to take that on as collateral, a desire for that collateral to maybe be uh, it can be liquidated if it needs to be, and we're working on really building those roads out. But it's not going to happen overnight, and I think we are in the early days of this. We're just now at $1 billion, I think, in tokenized treasuries,
Mhm.
kind of system wide for the most part. And as that grows, there's going to be just increasing demand from counterparties, from clients to be able to use it in a variety of ways. Yield is the first step. Just being able to have yield on chain and keep it next to all of my other assets and be able to go redeem and purchase it very rapidly.
Yeah.
Next is going to be, well, I want to make it usable, and we're going to have to track up to the degree of complexity over time as we see increasing demands and needs for that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's so true is the market's mature outside of what Superstate is building, the market across DeFi is maturing to have solutions for regulated, kind of more regulated asset classes. And so I think about like Uniswap before and using these ideas of hooks to make sure that all counterparties participating in a pool are a vetted counterparty. And that way
Yes.
now you unlock, and this is, and I know you mentioned this, is giving these real world assets these these powerful features that the blockchain brings. You have the transparency, the settlement time, and then you have the composability. And so it's really fun and interesting to see this space move so quickly, and the composability of all the kind of the crypto Lego building blocks coming together to solve problems for all of these different verticals within the space. So it's
You're
interesting to see.
you're absolutely right. And right now our clients are mostly crypto native,
Mhm.
so they're generally pretty comfortable with how things work. And if anything, they make increasingly interesting asks of what we can bring forward.
Huh.
I think that what I think kind of more broadly, it's like, okay, well, how do we bring new participants kind of on chain that maybe are curious, hesitant, unsure. I think this type of product, because it is on the back end a traditional fund, very straightforward, very vanilla short-term government bond fund with just crypto superpowers. Um, I think we're going to see those who are maybe willing to take the risk or kind of dabble are going to start to dip their toes on the traditional finance side. But the
Hmm.
real trick is going to be when they do interact with that sort of composability and they see the speed, they see the settlement, they see the need that you don't need to reconcile. You can just literally have a machine inspect and confirm, yes, this is correct and it works. I think it's going to be really hard to go back once you experience those superpowers. You're just going to be, I can't go back to having to wait 2 days to call my counterparty and inquire like, did it work?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
are we
absolutely.
done?
Absolutely. And it's I think one of the interesting things too is as you mentioned, having a good portion of your clients be crypto native, there's probably a little bit higher of a risk appetite to dabble in other things. And so as you start to kind of build out the next kind of layer of features and applications across what these assets can do or what these assets are, you kind of have uh, the base of familiarity of what these things are and why you want to bring them on chain to begin with. So
Oh,
that's super exciting.
absolutely.
So one of the things that I think is really interesting, obviously being in this space full time, um, is almost impossible to keep up with anything going on, and you can be online 24/7 and still be behind. So one of the things that I like to ask everybody is outside of what you're building and focusing on, what are some of the areas in this space in general that excite you, that you're curious by, and that you like to, at least if in any spare time, that you like to explore?
Great question. I am pretty heavily focused at Superstate and how do we make it work? How do we grow it? How do we make it really the most successful, innovative asset manager ever?
Mhm.
But absolutely right. Kind of outside of that, I do look at NFTs from time to time just because it's fun. Uh,
Mhm.
not not for any real reason beyond that.
Mm.
I do find it just every so often something fun emerges, and I'm like, oh, this is exciting. Um, but yeah, that's kind of what I really do look at is like it's what is fun,
Yeah.
that is maybe a bit of a departure from what I'm focusing on now, which
Mm.
is asset management, tokenization
Yeah.
of these things. And I think the blockchain space is becoming increasingly, as you said, expansive, really kind of, you know, gobbling up or replicating a lot of things that exist outside of on-chain. We have, of course, have gaming, have NFTs, have art. Um, we have, we'll probably have, all kinds of other things that kind of emerge from that. I am pretty curious to just see what happens over time with any sort of like real overlap with the metaverse or kind of more traditional gaming.
Yeah.
When you squint and look at NFTs and kind of digital assets, you're kind of like, yeah, like these things kind of exist in certain cases, but they're all kind of in walled gardens of various gaming platforms,
Yeah.
and just kind of wonder like, are they going to be able to like jump over and able to use it at other games, or you're able to it has some sort of value beyond the game itself in some way. Um, it's unclear exactly what that would really what that really look like, but I do wonder if there's going to be this the blockchain itself being fairly expansive and agnostic to a variety of applications. It's like, will we be able to see certain applications that are pretty focused and walled kind of allow for kind of a breakout of that into other
Yeah.
gardens.
I think that's super true. And to your point, it's almost like the market. I don't want to say it's fragmented, but it's really hard to see where all this is happening because of these layer twos and app chains and L3s coming out where those applications, may exist and the growth of them are existing, but it's just kind of hard to see if you're not kind of actively over there and participating. So outside of the crypto space, obviously the rest of us we're regular human beings and not degenerates. What do you like to do for fun outside of working and exploring the the chain world?
Yes, yes. I live in California with my wife, and we we like to go on hikes around the various Northern California trails whenever we can that are close to the city. And then we like to cook a lot. I think kind of the thing that I like to do outside of work is try to get outside, touch grass, use your hands. I'm not a gardener, but I will like run around the small garden that we have
There you
and
go.
and try to do something there.
That's
Um, yeah,
awesome. Well, Reid, I really appreciate you joining the podcast today. I'm really excited to see what Superstate continues to build and innovate in this entire vertical. Obviously, you guys have such a rock solid team of people that basically defined DeFi from the beginning. And so as this category emerges and you guys are leading the way, I'm really excited to see what you continue to do. For all the listeners, if anybody wanted to stay up to date with you or with Superstate, any places they should go, any links, sites that you want them
yeah.
to check out.
Uh, Superstate.co is our primary website. We're of course on Twitter, so if you want to reach us there, and LinkedIn, these are all very easily accessible places if you're a qualified purchaser and interested in registering and being able to hold the USTB. Superstate.co/register is where you start, and love to see more people there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Reid. I appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you for having me.